I woke up to the sound of metal grinding against wood, followed by a hollow crack that felt like it split the air in half. At first, I thought a tree had fallen. Then I heard voices, high-pitched, self-satisfied voices, laughing over the crash of splintering boards. When I looked out my front window, my stomach did that slow, sinking roll you get before a car accident. Standing in my yard, with a yellow excavator parked like it owned the place, was HOA President Karen, a fluorescent safety vest straining over her shoulders, barking orders like she was commanding an army. My fence, my hand-built, meticulously restored, historically registered fence, was being ripped from the ground like it was scrap wood. She saw me before I even made it to the porch. "Oh good, you're here," she called, her tone dripping with the kind of fake cheeriness people use right before they ruin your life. "We're finally getting rid of this eyesore." She gestured grandly to the wreckage, as if she were unveiling a statue in my honor. I stopped dead on the porch steps. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" My voice was calm, which was dangerous. When I'm calm, I'm usually calculating. "This fence doesn't comply with the updated HOA standards," she said, like that was the end of the discussion. "We voted to remove it last week." "Funny," I said, "because my property isn't part of the HOA." Karen didn't even blink. "Oh, we decided to annex your property into the HOA. It's better for neighborhood uniformity." I almost laughed. Almost. You can't just decide that. That's not how property law works. "Well, the board approved it," she said with a smirk. "And frankly, that thing is a hazard. You should be thanking me." The thing in question wasn't just a fence. It was black walnut, salvaged from a 19th century estate, hand-carved by craftsmen whose tools are now museum pieces. I'd spent a year restoring it, every spindle, every ornate cap. Appraisers had called it architecturally significant. Preservationists had begged me to keep it intact. It wasn't just worth money, it was irreplaceable. I walked up until I was eye level with her. "Karen, if you don't stop this right now, you're going to regret it." Her smile widened as if she thought she'd won. "I've heard that one before." She waved at the excavator operator. "Keep going." The bucket swung forward, smashing through another section of wood with a crunch that made my teeth ache. Karen actually clapped. I could feel the muscles in my jaw locking. This wasn't the time to yell, though. Yelling would make me look unhinged. What I needed was to keep her talking. "You're going to pay for this," I said, and she gave me the kind of condescending look you give a child who threatens to tell the teacher. "Oh please. It's a fence." By the time the machine stopped, half of it was in a heap on the ground. The rest looked like a crime scene. I pulled out my phone and started snapping pictures, making sure to get her face, the machine, and the carnage all in one frame. She noticed and scoffed. "What, you think you're going to sue me?" "Honey, we have liability insurance." "Not enough," I said. That's when she made her first mistake. She followed me back toward my porch, still lecturing me about neighborhood standards and how property values were everyone's responsibility. This let me get her voice, clear as day, on video saying, "We're tearing it down whether you like it or not." I didn't bother arguing anymore. Let her think she'd won. People like Karen only understand consequences when they've already stepped into the bear trap. 2 hours later, the appraiser from the Preservation Society was in my driveway, staring at the rubble like he'd walked into the aftermath of an art heist. His face went pale. "Do you realize what this is worth?" he asked, holding up a broken spindle like it was a relic. I did. And by the time Karen learned it, she'd wish she'd taken a sledgehammer to her own house instead. Karen's first clue that she might have underestimated the situation came about 24 hours later, though I doubt she realized it at the time. She was in her driveway, barking orders at some poor landscaping crew about pruning angles, when a very official-looking white SUV pulled up in front of my house. The side was stenciled with the state seal, and out stepped a man in a navy blazer with a clipboard. He didn't glance at her. He walked straight to me. "Mr. Reynolds?" he asked, his voice brisk and no-nonsense. That's me. I'm from the State Historic Preservation Office. We received your call about the destruction of the registered architectural structure. He said it loud enough for Karen to hear, which wasn't hard. She'd already frozen mid-rant. I invited him to the yard. He took one look at the pile of black walnut and whistled through his teeth. This is bad. This isn't just vandalism. This is destruction of protected property. Karen finally decided to march over. Excuse me, she cut in, but that fence was a violation of our community guidelines. The HOA has authority here. The inspector didn't even look at her. Do you own this property? She faltered. Well, no, but the HOA. He cut her off. Then you have no jurisdiction. And you've destroyed a structure appraised at. He looked at his clipboard. $286,000. The landscaping crew actually stopped working. Karen's face did something fascinating, her mouth stayed open, but the color drained so fast it was like someone had pulled a plug in her head. That's not possible. I pulled out the Preservation Society's appraisal documents and handed them to the inspector. All in black and white, I said. Original craftsmanship, rare material, documented historical value. The inspector nodded. This is grand theft and destruction of cultural heritage. I'll be forwarding this to the county prosecutor. Mr. Reynolds, you'll also want to file a civil suit. Karen sputtered. This is ridiculous. It's just a fence. No, ma'am, the inspector said, finally meeting her eyes with the kind of stare that makes you regret every life choice. That was a piece of history. You've destroyed it. When he left, Karen tried to regain her footing. You're bluffing, she said to me. No fence is worth that much. That's the thing about you, Karen, I replied. You always assume you know more than everyone else. You never think someone might just be patient enough to let you prove yourself wrong. Over the next week, the HOA board started whispering. I saw the treasurer, Jim, pretending to check his mailbox 3 times a day just to avoid eye contact. The vice president, Linda, was suddenly on vacation. Even the newsletter stopped appearing in mailboxes. Then came the certified letter from my attorney, 3 pages of legal fury that landed in Karen's mailbox like a lead weight. I knew when she read it because I heard the screech from across the street. She stormed over that afternoon, waving the letter like it was a snake she wanted to kill. You're suing me for $300,000? Are you insane? Adjusted for restoration costs and damages, I said calmly, sipping my coffee on the porch. You can't get blood from a stone, she spat. Good thing you have a house, I replied. That shut her up for a beat. Then she tried a new tactic. If you drop the suit, I'll authorize the HOA to pay for a new fence. A pressure-treated pine picket fence from Home Depot? I asked, already knowing the answer. Well, yes. No deal. Her face hardened. You know what? You're not going to win. My brother-in-law's a lawyer. Then I'll see him in court, I said, and went inside. From there, I stopped engaging with her directly. Every communication went through my lawyer. This infuriated her, which I could tell because she started leaving voicemails for me that ranged from faux sweet to outright screaming. I saved every one. Meanwhile, the Preservation Society went into full attack mode. They published a piece in the local paper about the tragic destruction of a rare historical artifact, complete with before and after photos. The comments section lit up like a bonfire. Neighbors who'd previously avoided picking sides suddenly remembered how Karen once tried to find me for my mailbox, and Karen had my cousin's car towed. The tide was turning. One evening, just as I was settling in with a drink, I saw a realtor's SUV parked in front of Karen's house. She was giving him a tour, all smiles, but her voice carried across the street. I just need to know how quickly we can list. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Then I remembered the sound of my fence being chewed apart by that excavator. 2 days later, my lawyer called. We've got them. She didn't have HOA board approval in writing to annex your property. The vote she claimed happened? No minutes, no notice, no quorum. It's legally non-existent. That means she acted solely as an individual, no liability shield from the HOA. Which meant one thing: Karen's personal assets were in the crosshairs. That night, I sat on my porch with a beer, watching the sun go down, and wondered how long it would take her to realize that the fence she destroyed wasn't just worth more than her house, it might actually end up being her house. The moment Karen realized the lawsuit wasn't just a scare tactic happened on a Tuesday morning, and I know this because she came pounding on my door at 8:15 a.m. like the house was on fire. I opened it halfway, coffee in hand, and there she stood, no makeup, hair unbrushed, wearing a faded sweatshirt that said, HOA Strong in peeling letters. She looked like someone had deflated her overnight. "You have to drop this," she blurted. No good morning, no pleasantries, just straight into desperation. "Good to see you too, Karen. How's your morning?" I said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm serious. You don't understand what's happening here." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I replied. "You demolished a structure worth almost $300,000 without permission, lied about having authority, and now you're being sued personally. That about sums it up." Her voice dropped. "They're talking about seizing my house." I sipped my coffee slowly, letting her words hang in the air. "They? My lawyer? The bank? Everyone? That's rough," I said, feigning sympathy. "But actions have consequences. You know, neighborhood standards and all." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "If I lose my house, I'll have nowhere to go." I let a smirk tug at the corner of my mouth. "Well, maybe the HOA will annex someone else's property for you." Her eyes narrowed. "You think this is funny?" "I think it's ironic," I said. "There's a difference." She stormed off, muttering about how I'd regret this, but it was different from her usual bluster. There was fear in it. That fear grew louder over the next week, because the court date was set, and the county prosecutor had filed a separate criminal charge for destruction of protected property. The criminal part was what really made her sweat. Civil suits could be paid off or settled, but a conviction meant a permanent record, fines, maybe even probation. The Preservation Society wasn't letting this go either. They'd gotten a local TV station interested. When the reporter showed up with a camera crew, I happily gave them a tour of the crime scene and produced photos, appraisals, and a few select clips of Karen telling the excavator to keep going. By that night, the segment was on the evening news. The anchor actually said, "In an unusual dispute between a homeowner and an HOA president," while Karen's face filled the screen, frozen mid-smirk from my video. The next morning, she tried a new approach: damage control. She sent the HOA secretary to my door with a typed settlement offer that read like a ransom note written by a bureaucrat. It offered me replacement of fence at a value not to exceed $5,000 in exchange for dropping all claims and agreeing to a non-disparagement agreement. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. "Tell Karen I said no," I told the secretary. That afternoon, I got a call from my lawyer. "They're going to try to liquidate her assets before the court can freeze them," he said. "If she sells her house fast enough, she might avoid paying you the full amount." "Can we stop that?" I asked. "Already filed the motion." The following week was a slow-motion train wreck for her. First, the judge granted the asset freeze. Then, the HOA board, finally realizing she'd acted without legal authority, held an emergency meeting and voted to remove her as president. The notice was taped to the community bulletin board, and I may or may not have strolled by just to enjoy the crowd gathered around it. Karen didn't take it well. She started pacing her front porch in the evenings, yelling on the phone about backstabbing cowards and spineless traitors. One night, she threw a ceramic planter at her own mailbox, shattering it. The real breaking point came when the appraiser I'd hired returned to give a final valuation for the court. He brought a binder of documents and photos showing comparable sales of antique black walnut fencing from historic estates, most of which were in the $15,000 to $20,000 per panel range. My fence had been nearly 50 panels. The total number was brutal, and it didn't include the punitive damages my lawyer was pushing for. When Karen saw him walking up my driveway with that binder, she bolted out of her house. "This is harassment," she shouted. "Only if you're guilty," I called back. 2 days before the hearing, her brother-in-law, yes, the lawyer she'd bragged about, called my attorney. His voice, according to my lawyer, was somewhere between begging and bargaining. They wanted to know if we'd settle for half. I didn't even have to think about it. "Absolutely not," I said. And then the day came. Courtroom 3, County Courthouse. Karen arrived in a navy pantsuit that was supposed to look professional but somehow made her seem even more defensive. I was in a gray suit, calm as a pond. The Preservation Society's representative sat behind me, and I could feel the satisfaction radiating off him. The prosecutor started with the video of her ordering the demolition. Then came the appraisals, the property records proving I wasn't in the HOA, and the preservation registry document. Karen's defense tried to claim she'd been misinformed about my property status, but the judge didn't buy it. Especially when my lawyer played the part of the voicemail where she said, "I don't care what the law says, we're doing it." By the end of the day, the verdict was clear. Guilty of willful destruction of protected property, liable for the full civil amount plus costs. The number the judge read out loud was so high I actually saw Karen's knees buckle. As we left, she muttered, "You're ruining my life." I stopped in the doorway, turned just enough to meet her eyes, and said, "No, Karen. You did that." And I knew then that the next twist, the one she hadn't even considered, was still waiting for her in the form of a very public auction notice. Do you want me to roll straight into Chapter 4 where the auction plays out and things get even worse for her? The auction notice went up faster than I expected. 3 days after the verdict, there it was on the county's foreclosure listings. Single-family residence, 4-bed, 3-bath, subject to court-ordered sale, proceeds to satisfy judgment. Right under it was my name, listed as the primary creditor. I didn't even have to dig for the details. The local gossip network did that for me. By lunch, I'd gotten 6 texts from neighbors with screenshots of the listing, some with celebratory emojis, others just with the single word, "finally." Karen must have seen it at the same time because the next thing I heard was her slamming her front door so hard the echo carried across the street. She stalked to her SUV, phone pressed to her ear, her voice carrying like always. "They can't do this. There has to be another way." Then she peeled out of the driveway like the asphalt had personally insulted her. The Preservation Society called me that evening. "We've been informed the county intends to make this auction very public," their director said. "Apparently there's some community interest." "Community interest," I repeated, amused. "You mean people are going to show up just to watch her lose?" "That's one way to put it," he said, but I could hear the smile in his voice. In the days leading up to the sale, Karen went into a sort of manic overdrive. She posted long, rambling Facebook updates about corruption in local government and how my neighbors betrayed me. She claimed she was the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by vindictive people who don't understand the bigger picture. Each post got progressively fewer supportive comments and more snark. By the third rant, someone had posted the link to the news segment featuring her demolition order, and the tide of comments turned into open mockery. The morning of the auction, I arrived early. The courthouse steps were already busy. Neighbors in lawn chairs, local reporters setting up cameras, even a couple of food trucks parked at the curb. I half expected someone to start selling popcorn. The auctioneer, a stocky man with a deep voice, stood at the top of the steps with a microphone and a stack of paperwork. Karen showed up 10 minutes later, looking like she hadn't slept. She wore a crisp white blazer over a black blouse, but the outfit couldn't hide the fact that her hands trembled when she lit her cigarette. She avoided looking at me, which was fine. I had no interest in small talk. The auction began with smaller properties, Foreclosed condos, a vacant lot, before moving to item 7, 114 Pineview Lane. Karen's house. The auctioneer read the description, the square footage, the as-is condition. Then he opened the bidding. Starting at $150,000, do I hear 155? A man in a ball cap raised his hand. The bidding moved quickly, 160, 170, 180. I stayed quiet, leaning against the railing, watching Karen's knuckles go white as she gripped her folder of papers. At 220, the bidding slowed. Then a woman in a navy dress jumped in at 230, and the man in the ball cap countered with 240. I could see Karen's lips moving, counting, maybe? Trying to calculate if the sale would cover the judgment. That's when my lawyer leaned toward me. You know we could. I glanced at him. We could what? Bid. I considered it for all of 3 seconds. Why not? When the auctioneer called for 250, I raised my hand. A small ripple went through the crowd. People knew me, and they knew what this meant. Karen looked over then, and the moment her eyes landed on me, she knew exactly what I was doing. The bidding turned into a triangle. Me, the man in the ball cap, and the woman in navy. At 270, the woman dropped out. At 280, the man hesitated, then shook his head. 280,000, going once, going twice. Sold, the auctioneer bellowed, pointing at me. To bidder number 12. The crowd murmured. Someone actually clapped. Karen just stared at me, her cigarette burning down to the filter between her fingers. I walked over to her slowly, my lawyer trailing behind. Looks like I'm your new landlord, I said softly. You're disgusting, she hissed. Maybe. But I'm also thorough. That night, the legal transfer paperwork landed in my email. The irony was sharp enough to taste. Karen had destroyed something worth more than her house, and now her house was mine. I didn't even have to wait to enjoy the victory. The county gave her 30 days to vacate. The weeks that followed were surreal. Karen alternated between rage and pitiful appeals. One day, she screamed at me from her porch, accusing me of orchestrating the whole thing from the start. The next, she left a note in my mailbox asking if she could rent back the property until she found a new place. I declined, of course, politely, through my lawyer. Word spread fast that I owned her house. Neighbors who'd been quietly tolerating her for years started stopping by to congratulate me. Some told me stories about HOA fines she'd levied for things like having too many wind chimes or using the wrong shade of mulch. It was like a support group meeting where everyone had the same villain. 2 days before her move-out deadline, I came home to find a moving truck in her driveway. She was standing by the back, giving instructions to 2 exhausted-looking movers. When she saw me, she shouted, "You think you've won? You haven't seen the last of me." I smiled. "Oh, I've seen more than enough, Karen." But the truth was, she wasn't entirely wrong. I had a feeling she'd try something else before the 30 days were up. And if I was right, it would hand me the perfect chance for the final twist. Do you want me to roll straight into Chapter 5 where she makes one last desperate move and it backfires spectacularly? Karen's final act began on the very last night she was supposed to be in the house. The deadline was midnight. At 11:17 p.m., I was in my living room sipping a scotch, confident she was finally gone, when I saw movement across the street. Not the organized bustle of movers, but the jerky, furtive shape of someone sneaking. I stepped to the window. There she was, Karen, darting from her SUV to the side of the house, carrying what looked like a bright orange 5-gallon bucket. Now, I'm not the kind of guy to jump to conclusions, but there are very few good reasons someone carries an orange bucket toward a property they've been court-ordered to vacate. I slipped on my jacket, grabbed my phone, and quietly crossed the street, sticking to the shadows. The closer I got, the clearer it became. She was sloshing the contents, thick, dark liquid, onto the side of the house. "Karen," I called out. My voice was calm, almost conversational. She froze, half-turning. The look on her face told me she'd been counting on me being asleep. "I'm just cleaning something," she stammered. "Cleaning?" At 11:30 at night? With what, motor oil? Her jaw worked like she was chewing something bitter. It's paint. I'm touching up. I pulled my phone up, the red recording light blinking. Touching up what, exactly? The siding you're trying to vandalize before you leave. Her face twisted. You ruined my life. You took my home. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. And you think I'm going to just hand you this house in perfect condition? So the answer is yes, you're vandalizing it, I said. She lunged toward me like she might grab the phone, but I stepped back just far enough that she stopped. Karen, if I were you, I'd get back in that SUV and drive away before the cops get here. She laughed, short, sharp, mean. You're bluffing. You wouldn't call them. I tapped the screen. Already did. You're on speaker, Officer Daniels. You still there? Karen's eyes went wide as a voice came from my phone. Still here, Mr. Reynolds. We're 2 minutes out. She muttered something under her breath and bolted for her car, leaving the bucket tipped over on the driveway, black paint oozing toward the curb. I just stood there, watching her taillights vanish. The patrol car arrived right on cue. Daniels, a broad-shouldered cop who'd been dealing with HOA nonsense for years, shone his flashlight on the paint. She's really gunning for the high score in bad decisions, huh? I think she's got it locked in, I said. We filed the report, and I made sure to send my video to both my lawyer and the insurance adjuster. In the morning, the paint stain was still there, gleaming in the sunlight like a trophy. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. 3 days later, I got a call from the county prosecutor. Karen's little midnight art project wasn't just petty vandalism. It was destruction of property in violation of a court order, which put her in contempt. There was also the fact that the paint had seeped into the storm drain, which meant an environmental fine from the city. It was almost poetic. The court moved fast. Within 2 weeks, Karen was back in front of a judge, this time without the expensive blazer. She looked smaller, somehow, like the weight of the last few months had crushed her shoulders inward. The judge didn't waste time. He ordered her to pay restitution for the damage, tacked on the environmental fine, and, here's the kicker, issued a 6-month probation order requiring her to complete community service. When the hearing ended, she shot me a look that was supposed to be venomous, but it just looked tired. I leaned in and whispered, "You could have just left quietly." Owning her former house turned out to be satisfying in ways I hadn't anticipated. The first week after the painters and cleaners were done, I rented it out to a young couple who couldn't stop talking about how happy they were to have a yard for their dog. They planted flowers along the walkway. The air felt lighter. The neighbors noticed too. People who'd spent years avoiding HOA drama suddenly came by with pies, offers to help with repairs, or just to sit on the porch and talk. It was like Karen's departure had lifted a storm cloud no one realized was suffocating them. One evening, about a month after she was gone, I was walking past the community bulletin board and saw something new pinned up, a flyer for neighborhood improvement volunteers needed. At the bottom, in small print, it listed coordinator, Karen M. Apparently her community service hours were being spent picking up trash along the highway and organizing cleanup days. I couldn't help it, I laughed all the way home. The irony was perfect. The woman who'd tried to destroy my property under the guise of community standards was now literally cleaning the community because the law told her to. From start to finish, the whole thing had taken less than a year. 12 months from the moment her excavator bucket hit my fence to the day I watched her slink out of the courtroom with her new probation terms. It wasn't quick, and it wasn't without its headaches, but it was thorough. Every move I'd made had been deliberate, patient, and well-timed. And that's what people like Karen never understand. They think winning is about being the loudest, the most aggressive, the one in control of the moment. But real winning? That's about thinking 5 steps ahead, keeping your cool, and letting them walk themselves right into the trap. The last time I saw her in person, she was on the side of the road in an orange vest, picking up litter with a grabber stick. I slowed the truck just enough for her to notice, gave her a friendly wave, and drove on. I doubt she'll ever forget the sound of that excavator tearing into my fence. I know I won't. But I'll also never forget the moment I stood on those courthouse steps, holding the deed to her house, knowing that for all her bluster and power plays, the final checkmate had been mine from the very beginning. And that, I suppose, is what made it all worth it.